Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk to you about one of the great masterpieces of 20th century music, Bartók's Music for Strings, Percussion, and Celesta. Now, this is an amazing piece. It really is, both expressively and formally. It was commissioned by Paul Zacher. Now, the Bartók is written for double string orchestra, and he's incredibly precise in his performance indications. I mean, I just want to show you, it's rather fascinating to look at. If you look at the first page of the score here, there it is. I am showing it. You will see he indicates what the layout of the instruments ought to be. It's right here. You know, you've got the string set orchestra 1, string orchestra 2, percussion, and the bass is in the back. Now, it's never played that way. I don't know why, but every time I've ever seen it, the basses are behind their respective string sections this way and not behind the percussion. And, you know, everybody does what's best for the room. Bartók also indicates the timings, and the timings are terribly quick. No one ever gets through the finale in less than 6 minutes. And the first movement, which he has at a little more than 6 minutes, usually takes somewhere around 7 or 8 or 9. It's, you know, I mean, Bartók himself said that the timings were only for idiots, basically, not for people who really understood his music. So we don't really have to pay attention to them, but the proportions are helpful, first of all. And second of all, it is good to know that Bartók intended that the piece should probably go more quickly than more slowly. I think that this is most important in the first movement because while many performances are close to Bartók's indicated timings in the last 3 movements, they tend to drag out that opening fugue, and that for me is problematic. Not just because it takes a long time, but because it contains the thematic substance of the entire work. And so you want to hear it at a certain speed so that when it comes back later, you know what you're listening to. It helps in recognizing the thematic workmanship. For example, I'll give you an example, a couple examples. The opening fugue is this wonderfully demented, chromatic, slithery thing. And it's based on these very short intervals. Da 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 da, ba da 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 da. I can't do it. I'm not going to try. I mean, it's embarrassing. But what he does is the piece opens up like a fan. You know, it has these tiny intervals. The phrases get bigger and longer. They reach higher. And the important ones are the first 2. You hear them right away. You hear them a lot in the fugue. So you get them into your head. So the second movement, which is bum bum ba da 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 dum bum 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 bum, is actually da 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 da. It's the second phrase of the fugue. Bits of the fugue separate the episodes in the Adagio. And then in the finale, the actual first theme of the finale is an inversion of the fugue theme, which you hear after the climax of the fugue. It starts da 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 da, and the finale is da 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 da. So the whole piece is incredibly tightly formally integrated. And you want to be able to hear that. Maybe not the first time, but the better you get to know it, the more these things will begin to strike you. And then at the end of the finale, the actual fugue theme comes back, but in diatonic as opposed to chromatic intervals, that is, moving in whole steps instead of half steps. And so you also want to have the rhythm and the sense, the shapes of the melodies in place. And if you take that fugue too slowly, if it stretches out, it becomes harder to hear it when it returns later in quicker tempos. So there should be some sort of plausible relationship amongst them, even if you're not following Bartók's timings exactly right. Now, the third movement, the Adagio, which is one of Bartók's greatest night pieces, is quite famous because it was the horror movie music in The Shining. You know, the scene when the blood comes flying down from the elevators, you know, and gushes into the hallways. That's Bartók. And you hear it numerous times in different scenes. You know, Kubrick uses the music from this movement, and it works perfectly because it is horror movie music. And in fact, one of the things about recordings of this piece that always gets me is that I can't really enjoy live recordings because there's always too much audience noise. For moments like the beginning of the Adagio or the beginning of the Fugue, there has to be absolute stillness. The music has to emerge from complete silence because the silence is part of the atmosphere of the piece. And when you hear people coughing and rustling and even performance noises, for me, it just shatters the atmosphere. You may feel differently. And there is one recording we're going to talk about, which is live because for reasons I'll describe in a moment. But, generally speaking, the performance needs to be made with absolute concentration and silence in the soft moments so that the music really, really tells. So let's talk about the great recordings. There are a bunch of them here. First of all, and first and probably foremost, is Fritz Reiner's. This one, it's fairly close to Bartók's timings. It's just a smoker of a performance. It's as idiomatic as can be. It is magnificently played. It has one problem. There is a slight, it's not terrible, but it's there, a slight tape dropout at the very climax of the fugue on that note. And that makes me crazy. It may not bother you as much as it bothers me, but it's audible, it's obvious. The rest of the performance is simply magnificent in every possible way, and it's just great. The next really, really fine version that I just think hearing just for the string playing is Mravinsky from 1965. This is a live recording. Russian audiences are notoriously noisy in a lot of these performances, but and the performance isn't perfect. At one point, the timpanist gets a little lost. There are some things that go wrong, but if you want to hear simply amazing string playing, and we'll be talking about another one of those, but this is of a different kind. This is string playing of a physical intensity that is really, we just don't hear it anymore. This is, you will play the way I want you to, or you will be sent to the gulag immediately with your family and relatives. It's these people are playing with fear in their hearts, and it is astounding. And so, once you know the piece, this is not a first recommendation. Once you know the piece, it's become something of a showpiece for phenomenal strings. And you have to remember, it was written for a chamber orchestra, for Paul Zacher, who recorded it really rather poorly, actually. And it can be played by chamber forces. And when you hear something like this, you realize it just sounds too thin for, when played by small forces. It really, really needs a divided but full orchestral string section to have the kind of impact that the music can have. Anyway, that's one. The other one for the strings, of course, is Herbert Von Carrion. Now, Carrion recorded this twice. Once for EMI in the late 50s. It's not great. It really isn't. It's a not sonically great, and the orchestra had not become what he, later trained it to be. But this sucker, holy cow! You've got, the string playing is such that it's extraordinary. The tempos are slow. This is one of the slower versions out there. But the intensity is sustained simply by the timbre of the string instruments. And so you just can't really argue with it because it's so powerful. Yes, it's a little heavy-footed, but wow, it's just amazing in its impact and its sonority. And so you really need to hear it. It's coupled, by the way, with Stravinsky's Apollon Musagette. I've always hated this performance. I think this is one of those slick, oily Carrion things. But then again, I've never really liked the piece. So, what can I say? Maybe it's a fabulous portion of a performance of a piece I don't like, but I don't care. You get it for the Bartók. It is extraordinary and quite the experience. One of Carrion's really, really great recordings. And a wonderful example of how his approach can work in music where you might not think it otherwise would. More idiomatically, however, Schulte with the London Symphony. Now, Schulte did it twice. He did it in Chicago, and he did it with the LSO. The Chicago version is digital. It's nothing like the LSO one. The LSO one is very similar to Reiner's. It's swift. It's forceful. It's vicious where it needs to be. It has that devastating emotional impact. I mean, Bartók, his music is an odd combination sometimes of almost glacial emotional coldness, and then extreme expressionistic passion. And these things exist side by side. It's part of the tension that creates, the fascination in his music. You have like the Fugue, which is extremely formally perfect, but it's emotionally numbing. It's terrifying music. The same thing with the Adagio. But then you've got, the finale is a light, happy folk dance, basically, So the range of expression in these pieces is very, very wide. And Schulte captures it very, very well in this LSO recording, if you can find it. Do not be deceived. In fact, Decca really, really should do, like they did in Korea, an early Schulte box. There was this edition called Schultissimo, which was never released here. There was like 4 boxes. And Decca, of course, has done all the Schulte Chicago recordings. But for my money, remember his 3 major bases of operation were Chicago, Vienna, and even earlier, the London Symphony for his early career. And when he was at Covent Garden, too. So you really, really should have a London box and maybe a Vienna box. I don't know. I would love to have all those London recordings in a box because some of them were just marvelous. Some of them sucked, like Mahler 3. That was putrid. But basically the LSO Bartók recordings were better than his Chicago remakes. And that was true of a lot of the Mahlers, too. So we sort of need that. But, we'll see. Another one that was a big surprise, and this was the piece that sort of actually got me into the work, was Neville Marriner with the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. Now, Marriner made, as I'm sure you know, a limited number of contemporary music recordings, and these were all put together in a separate contemporary music box, and now most of them are in the giant Academy of St. Martin in the Fields box that's just come out. But this is an absolutely great recording. You've got the music for SP&C, the Divertimento, and the Shostakovich First Piano Concerto with John Ogden. And this Bartók was extraordinary, and I think it changed the view a lot of us had about Marriner's ability, too, because the playing is absolutely, obviously clean as a whistle, but it also has the right intensity, the right urgency to put the piece across. And what really turned me on to this piece was the fact that initially, when I first encountered it, I saw a performance by the Baltimore Symphony under their conductor, Sergio Commissiona, who was, And I remember reading in the program notes, the note saying, well, the opening fugue carries the art of dissonant chromatic string writing to its apex. And I was listening to this thing going, this is the most goddamn ugly thing I've ever heard in my life. Why would anybody want to carry the art of dissonant chromatic string writing to its apex? I just hated it. I thought it was just an ugly piece of trash. And I put it aside for a while. But then, I don't know why, I got this recording. I figured I'd give it another shot, and I played it. And bam! It just hit me. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever heard in my life. So it just goes to show, either you have to be prepared, or the performance really matters, or a combination of the two. But that was the performance that did it for me. And ever since then, it's been one of the great loves of my musical life. Now I have to finish up 3 recordings of quite extraordinary quality. This is with Zoltán Kocis and Ivan Fischer and the Budapest Festival Orchestra. Now, this was originally included in the box of Kocis's complete Bartók music for piano and orchestra, which vanished. And it was also coupled in a single disc with the first piano concerto, which has vanished. And it's so hard to find. It was always hard to find. And it's a great, great, great performance. One of the great ones. If you can find it, grab it. You really should. Another one that's quite similar, because it involves the same people, or some of the same people, is this one. This is on Hungariton. This was the Bartók series that Zoltán Kocis was making before his death with the Hungarian National Philharmonic. Now, he turned out to be quite a fine conductor and a superb Bartók conductor, as you might expect, because he recorded the complete piano music and the piano concertos and everything else. This one is quite similar to the Fischer. It's a swift, exciting, idiomatic, perfectly played, Absolutely wonderfully interpreted performance. I really enjoy it. And again, it may be hard to find, but it exists at least. And it's first rate in every respect. In fact, his whole Bartók series, there were about 4 or 5 releases in this digital series, is exceptional, absolutely exceptional. But finally, here's another one that's probably hard to find. Dochnani in Cleveland. You know, Dochnani's Cleveland legacy was treated so badly by Decca. I mean, I can't even begin to describe. These releases were never promoted. They went out of print immediately. Some of them were not even released in this country. It was just awful what Decca did to them. And some of them are fabulous. And this is such an imaginative disc. You've got Janáček's Capriccio, for piano, left hand, and weird ensemble of brass and piccolo. And then you've got the Martinu, the Concerto for String Quartet and Orchestra, which is wonderful, and the Bartók. I've seen Dochnani play this in concert. He does it extraordinarily well. And of course, the Cleveland Orchestra is the Cleveland Orchestra. They are the ne plus ultra of ensemble precision and sensitivity and balance and intonation and all of those things. The performances I saw of him doing this live were some of the greatest performances of anything I ever saw. And this is a great record if you can find it. It's, remember, Bartók, Martinu, and Janáček. I mean, it was like the kiss of death from the day it was issued, but it's worth hearing and definitely worth finding. So those are my recommendations for music for strings, percussion, and celeste. I'm sure you'll have your own. I call it celeste. It's a Celesta, a celeste, a celeste. It changes whenever I say something. So please do not write and tell me I don't know how to say what it is. I'll call it a Celesta, and we'll be happy, okay? So keep on listening, folks, to the music for strings, percussion, and Celesta. Thank you, and take care.